Hello, it's Rhett Bartlett here from the Tigerland Vault, just preparing to release the next podcast episode of Retrospective. Look, all our players have come from different walks of life, and our guest today is no different. He debuted with Richmond at the age of 18 at centre half forward. He came from the amateurs. He studied agriculture at Dookie College, and he ended up playing in the Aussie Rules demonstration game at the 1956 Melbourne Olympics. Please make welcome Frank Dunin.
I'm well at the moment.
That's good to hear.
Basking in this temperate summer.
I thought you were going to say basking in Richmond's 3 premierships.
I did an interview about that earlier on. It was the launch of Mike Bowden's book, The Unbreakable Rock. And I said that we are still in the euphoria of Richmond's record-breaking 3 premierships in 4 years.
Well, we'll see how long it goes for, won't we?
Yeah.
I was when I was researching your career, I was surprised to discover that you came to Richmond, I think, through Melbourne Football Club.
Yes, I was allocated by district to Melbourne, but I never played with any form at Melbourne. I was exchanged for Peter Schofield.
And Schofield was a pretty good full forward.
Yes.
As a junior, and also a little bit with Richmond as well. So,
yes.
Were you a full forward? Did they swap full forward for full forward?
No. I came in as a centre half forward, and I'd spent my school days as a ruckman mainly, and when I elected to play with university, when I started university, I preferred to play in the amateurs rather than go to Melbourne thirds, and there I was. My career was followed by Jack Baggett, who was scouting for Richmond, and he recommended me to Richmond. He recommended that I was ready to play for Richmond, I should say. When I left school, I persuaded my coach, who was then Alan Killigrew, to introduce me to Richmond. So I went down for a training run, and with kick to kick, I managed to grab a mark. Albie Panama, was the coach then, saw this mark and decided that I might be a useful prospect. And so I was kept in the background, ready to go. And they followed me at University Blacks, and then halfway through the season, I was picked up by Richmond.
Gee, you've mentioned some famous names there. Jack Baggett, who was a great Richmond player, and his brother Ron Baggett was a champion for Melbourne. You were coached by Killigrew, were you?
This was at CBC St Kilda. We had, in my side last year at school, we had 6 league footballers. Laurie Mithen, Kevin Mithen, Donnie Williams, Jeff Feehan, Brian Walsh and myself.
Now, you said that you were, a centre-half forward, or a ruckman, sorry. How tall were you? Or are you?
6'2.5", I think, was the official figure.
What was your playing weight that they had you at?
I went from 13.5 stone to 14.4, I think, when I finished.
So, you're going to be a handy player, I suspect. They I reckon they saw you and went, oh, okay, you've got the size, because you were what, 17, 18?
I was 17, yes. I was actually 18 when I played my first game. I was a week after my 18th birthday.
And that was against Hawthorn, where you replace... I think they put you centre-half forward. You replace Ray Poulter, who didn't play.
Yeah, correct. And I cringed because Joey Poulter was one of our icons.
So, do you mean you cringed as in you felt you didn't feel like you should have been there? Is that what you mean?
I didn't feel worthy, no.
Poulter was just a champion player too, wasn't
he? Yes.
What do you remember about your first game? Anything stand out?
Yes, and I joked about it later on. I was playing on Clive Philp, who had just returned from the Victorian side. He played at centre half back for Victoria, and I was lucky enough to get a few kicks. Kicked the goal, and just after I kicked the goal, Teddy Fletcher, who was captain of Hawthorn at the time, he was a detective sergeant. He went past me and he turned round to Clive and snarled at him and says, "Hit him behind the ears, he's still wet there, Clive." Years later, I took out his niece to a ball, and I walked in to pick her up, and here was Teddy, and we had a big laugh about that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Not long after your first game, I saw some newspaper reports that said you had an infected foot from blisters and stuff for a few days. Do you remember that?
That was the first game, yeah. So I came out of that with, I think, somewhat tarnished boots that weren't helping my cause at all. And that particular day, I had blisters for a couple of days. They got pierced, and I was okay for the next week.
So did you provide your own footy boots, or does the club?
Well, at that time, I had my own footy boots. But soon after the blisters, I was confronted by Lou Zachariah, who was commissioned by the club to get me a pair of boots. Now, Lou and I became very close associates later on in life. I was coach of the Victorian Amateur side in the 67 Carnival in Hobart, and Lou was my manager.
Small world, Frank.
It is a small world. Of course, his daughter was Australian squash champion.
Yes. Well, did you? I hope you didn't have to pay for the new boots from the club, did you? From Lee?
No.
That's a relief. I thought maybe someone like a Charlie Callender might have helped you, get them or something like that.
Charlie Callender was the bane of every mother's life. My mother complained that we were always short of socks, and could Charlie please give us some more socks? And I remember Mum pleading with Tess Callender. She said, "Charlie is too tight. And he won't give us any socks, and this pleading did work occasionally. And you'd get 2 pair of socks in the season instead of 1.
That's surprising. I didn't think that he would end up giving you an extra pair. Having spoken to a few other teammates, he was very strict with what he would give out and write in his ledger.
But, of course, Charlie was a lovable character, and we were always supportive of him in the long run. We'd call him a mean person.
1953 was your first season at Richmond. In 1954, you didn't play a senior game, and I looked through the archives. Am I right to say that that's because you ended up studying?
What happened was that I played 1 game in the seconds in 1954, and we had been doing national service during the pre-season, and I was doing second-year agriculture, which meant that I was at Dookie College, going from we were in residence at Dookie College. And travel being what it was in those days, I had a clearance from Richmond after I played 1 game in the seconds, and I went and played with Dookie College in the Benalla Tungamar League. And that was an interesting little aspect to that, was that 3 years previously, the best and fairest in the Benalla Tungamar League was one John Landy.
The runner?
The runner.
Right.
The governor of Victoria. John actually played a few games with Melbourne Thirds, but he was best and fairest in the Benalla Tungamar League. And I only got to learn this because they did have a team of the century in for the Benalla Tungamar League, and I discovered that both John Landy and I were in that side.
Oh, congratulations. For those who don't know what Dookie College is, what are you studying at Dookie College?
Well, Melbourne University in those days had a 4-year course, and the second year of that course was in residence at Dookie College, which is an agricultural college between Benalla and Shepparton. Was run by the Department of Agriculture many years ago for agricultural education, and it hosted a 3-year diploma course. Hosted second year Melbourne University as well. It's changed its jurisdiction somewhat in these days. It still exists, and it's run under the direction of the Faculty of Agriculture from Melbourne University. There are 2 long-standing agricultural colleges in Victoria. One's at Longanong, outside Horsham, and Dookie is the other one.
Where did your interest in agriculture come from?
Place called Burraman near Rutherglen. In the immediate post-war, there was a polio scare, and there was talk of evacuation. Okay. So children, there was suggestion that children be quarantined out in the regions rather than in the city. And my mother's bridesmaid married a farmer at Burraman, and so we would go up there to explore the possibilities. I fell in love with the place eventually, used to spend my holidays there, and one time I was helping, I think as a 11-year-old, sow a crop, and I watched it emerge, and I thought I wanted to study more about it. And this farmer, George Griffin, encouraged me to do that. And so notwithstanding my parents' wishes, that when I got reasonable scores in my matriculation, they said I should do medicine. I said, no, I'll do agriculture. And that's how it came about.
Good on you. Dookie College was a fair distance away from Punt Road, so I'm guessing you couldn't work at Dookie College and then head down to the game in time. Is that why?
Yeah, that was right. I mean, travel was limited in those days, and training facilities and so forth. So that year was spent at the college, and an interesting year. Now that I live in Benalla, it's amazing the number of people I walk around the spectrum, and they remember.
Another small world for you, Frank. At the time, I think Richmond's secretary was it Maury Fleming? Was he still
Maury was secretary at that stage, yes.
How did he take your news that you were heading up for a year?
I think that there was consideration, and they said, well, it's in your interest and we can't do much about it. So you go ahead, because moving backwards and forward from Dookie with difficult transport arrangements would be distracting, to say the least. And so they were a bit reluctant, but it came about that way. It was interesting because in the build-up, we were in national service, and one of my roommates or dormitory mates was Vicky Ayler, and we had beds beside one another, and we hatched up a plan to sneak out on a Saturday with a taxi organised jointly by North Melbourne and Richmond, and about 4 of us would pile into this taxi. We'd go out the back gate or through the fence and meet the taxi, and then go down a practice game and come back about midnight. For 4 weeks before the season, Richmond were open to travelling footballers, but they felt that in the case of Dookie College, for the 12 months residence, that would be too much. So Maury reluctantly conceded.
Sorry, with national service, I'm not quite sure how it worked. Did you apply for national service, or were you picked?
You were picked. You were. It was compulsory pretty well, and subject to a medical test. And And so most people of our age were drawn into, I think it was about 6 months. You did a basic training course at Puckapunyal of 3 months, and then there were another 3 months of periodic camps with the CMF to complete. I think it might have been 140 days or something like that.
Right, yeah. What was the feeling like at that stage? Were you comfortable to do that? Did your family or your parents like the fact that you were selected, or is it something that's a bit, you're either for it or you're against it sort of thing?
Oh, no, it wasn't the same strain as when the conscription for Vietnam was occurring. It was just national service. That's what it meant. And you just did it. And you put up with it. And, had a bit of fun, met different blokes, and like, for instance, I developed a long-standing friendship with Mickey Aylett because of that. There was another one in our group who I had strong association with was Tony Capes, who became president of Footscray. He was a doctor, and we played together at Melbourne University, and we were in national service together. And Tony and I had a interesting relationship. 1956 Olympics. Mm-hmm. He played for the amateurs, and I played for the shamateurs.
The shamateurs.
Yeah, well, these were the so-called amateurs that played in the VFA and VFL. That's why it was my nickname for them, the shamateurs. And we had a reunion of that group organised by Dookie Tobin, he played in our side. It was to commemorate 50 years since that game occurred.
You were selected to play for that team. Did you have to try out for selection, or did they just randomly pick people?
They went through the lists of all the clubs. All those that had eligible amateur status were summoned, and then they, of that collection, I think we had something like about 30 people. They picked a side from that.
And it was played during the Olympics itself as a demonstration for people, correct?
Yes, it was played on the day before the closing ceremony, after all the field events had finished and so forth, so we had the ground to ourselves.
I have seen a little bit of footage of that game on YouTube. Do you have... I think you kicked 3 goals, Frank.
Yeah, I did, yeah. I was playing at centre-half forward.
Was it played in a serious manner?
Oh, yeah, it was fair dinkum.
Okay, yep.
But surprisingly, we were... overwhelmed by the amateurs. When you consider the names that were in there, like people like Dennis Cordner hardly got a touch. We had Brendan Edwards playing in the centre, Laurie Dwyer, Alex Gardner. There was a formidable centre line. Dick Fenton Smith he ran all over Dennis Cordner in the ruck. He was amazing. And I know Duncan Anderson was playing. And Jeff Tunbridge was playing as well. I remember those because I did play with those blokes once at Melbourne Uni.
Oh, another small world, Frank.
Yeah.
Who coached you in this Olympic team?
Bruce Andrew he coached us. I think it was Jack Bray, the Ormond coach, who coached the amateurs.
For those listening, can you explain the Guernsey that you wore?
Yes, it was our jumper was green with white cuffs, whereas the amateurs was white with green cuffs, and then across the chest were the Olympic rings in their different colours. And I remember once going to a show in Canberra of the Could Have Been Champions. I walked up, and being Canberra, of course, and it was middle of winter, it was as chilly as all hell, and I had a coat on, and I thought for a bit of a lark, I'll wear my Olympic jumper, which incidentally is now in the Richmond Museum. And I went up to Richo, the compere of the Could-have-beens, who's a Richmond supporter, and I said, listen, Tony Leonard we test him out with some questions. I showed him the jumper and I said, we'll test him out and see whether he knows what this jumper is. So in due course, during the show, Richo calls on Tony Leonard. He says, well, I've got a bloke out here. He said, see what your knowledge of football jumpers like, Tony. He said, have a look at this one. So I got up and opened my coat, and there it was, and he took one look at it, as quick as a flash. He says, West Heidelberg United. Which was so close to the truth. It was just an off-the-cuff reaction. But, of course, where was the Olympic Village? West Heidelberg.
There you go. There you go. How interesting. Were you able, because you played in this match, did that give you a bit of a right to see any of the Olympics yourself?
No, not at all.
That's disappointing.
I saw plenty of them anyway, because it was, during the Olympics, it was a real rort. You'd go in with a mate, and you'd go in the morning, and then you'd take your mate's ticket, and you'd walk out with it, and go out and find another mate, and bring him back in on this ticket, because it had a pass out. And so we were doubling up on tickets, and it was as easy as all hell.
Oh, you figured it out, Frank. You figured it out.
Well, I know there were four of us watched when Kutz won he beat Perry in the 10,000. We only had two tickets between us, but the four of us got in on that sort of deal.
I reckon when you came back from Dookie College, I reckon your best season at Richmond was 1955. Would you agree with that? You came fourth in the best and fairest that year.
Yeah, that would have been the year. Yes, I think I polled pretty well in the Brownlow too.
What position were you for that season?
I think I was playing in the ruck.
Okay.
I was playing in the ruck, and I was changing in the back line. So I remember that there was Tommy Hafey was in the back pocket, Alan Cason's full-back, and I was in the back pocket. Roy Wright, of course, was top dog in the ruck. But he didn't have a good year that year, and that probably gave me a bit of a chance to shine a bit.
I was going to say, you've got to try and fit in the team up against Roy Wright. That would have been hard. Of the teammates that you played with, who sort of stands out for you in terms of just the great teammates that you played with, in terms of skill? I
had great admiration for Des Ray. Not on the basis of skill, but on sheer tenacity and determination. And I thought a lot of him. There was one of the players that stands long in my memory was Jimmy Dean, that flowing left footer. But like all left footers, he turned around like the Queen Mary. It took a long time to come around onto that left foot, but and they couldn't turn on their right. But Deanie was a great player, and he had a real football brain. So I enjoyed playing with him. Ray Alsop was a player who I played with at University Blacks, and he also he rose to me in the Olympics game and also at Richmond. And he was an incredible rover. We never had to talk. He could read me. And it was amazing when we came back together at Richmond. He could read me straight away. He knew exactly where to be, where I was going to knock it, and all that sort of thing. It was an amazing association. And, of course, my great mate, Ron McDonald,
oh, right.
I thought he was an incredible mark, a huge kick, but he was no good in front of goal. So the only way you could get a goal out of Ron was to put him out about 60 yards out near the centre, and then let a drop kick go and he'd kick a goal. But if he was within 40 yards, no, he'd miss them all.
What, would he get nervous?
I don't know what he would, but he could not kick. But
was he right footed?
He was the same at golf. He couldn't putt.
Just couldn't finish it off, Frank. I'm going to assume that you were a right footer then, Frank.
Yes, yeah.
after hearing your Queen Mary joke about left footers, of which I am a left footer.
You are you?
I am, yes. My father was a right footer.
Oh, of course he was, yes, I knew that. I have a couple of my kids are a bit that way too, and one of them played with Claremont as a left footer.
That's right, that's good. We like left footers.
Yeah.
But hold on, did he turn around like the Queen Mary on his left?
Yeah. That was, that term came out of a side I was coaching up in Canberra, Monica under 19s, and Mickey Conlon was in that side. We had a bloke on the half forward flank, Tony Stiles, and he was a left footer, and his nickname was Mary. He took an age to line up. Yeah, and it's a nickname that's now become reasonably prevalent in Canberra circles.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right out.
If somebody's called Mary, you know he's a left footer.
Oh, right. Oh, keep an eye on that, my ear to the ground for that one. As we finish up, your Richmond career sort of started to finish up about 1959 into 1960 because you suffered a knee injury, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The practice games in 1960, and I won't bore you with the details of it because it's a good yarn and takes too long to tell.
You can give it the short version if you want, that's fine.
I know. Well, I've been to a sports night on the Wednesday, and I was talking to Artie Lister, who was the 3AW sports editor, and I said, Artie, you have not given us a tip for ages. It's about time you did. He said, I've got one on Saturday. He said, your mate will be riding it. He said, give me a ring at 11 o'clock. Anyway, so I work it out on Thursday. I get the Herald on the Thursday. I take it down to training, and I said, listen, I reckon I've worked out a tip for Saturday, and a thing called Declaray it was, but I didn't tell him that. It came from Berrigan. Anyway, sure enough, Kenny Ford's riding it, and it gets up at 14-1, and I'm on my way to the footy, but no, I get off the train at Caulfield, I go to the races, I back Declaray in the first race at 14-1. I've got all the sides money on it, and then I get back on the train with, a couple of £1,000, I think I had. And I'm sitting in the rooms distributing the money. And Alan McDonald's trying to get us to behave, and I'm dishing out all these funds. And then Charlie Callan comes in. He said, hey, listen, he said, I got a phone call from Big Bob Johnson over at Melbourne. He said, he wants to talk to you. I said, I know what he wants to. I said, so I've ducked out. Alan's trying to talk to us, and I've gone out and answered the phone in Charlie's office. And I said, yeah, Bob. I said, I put your 20 quid on it at 15-1. So we've got 300 quid to play with tonight at the Tots. I'll see you out there. Anyway, I go out and playing in the second quarter. I'm going like a German band on top of the world, and Herb Sawatsky falls on top of me, and there goes the knee. I finish up in bed that night in hospital on the Monday, and that was me forever. And I didn't go to the Trots that night, and the good thing I had, the Trots got beaten, so I saved some money. It took a bit of adjustment, but in retrospect, we can have a bit of a laugh about it.
It's been an absolute thrill to have a chat with you, Frank. I appreciate so much the time. And on behalf of all the Richmond supporters, thank you for choosing the Richmond Football Club and for playing your 69 games with them. And we're very much appreciative of that.
Oh, well, I appreciate the talk with you too, Rhett, and all the best to you, and keep that historical aspect going. And you're in a good barn there with the name of Bartlett. I mean, you're one step out of heaven, aren't you?
All the best too with what you're working on too there, Frank. I did some Google searches on you, and you seem to still be your name's out there and all that, so that's great.
Oh yeah, I'm still trying to write scientific papers and things like that. Of course, climate change gives us the opportunity to comment on things. That was what I was doing before I retired.
And that was the story of Frank Dunin, from Dookie College to Punt Road to the Olympic Games. If you get a chance, Google his name. His surname is spelled Dunin, and you'll see some of the work that he continues to do up in the country as well, relating to agriculture, etc. Thanks for listening,